So I am a little bit disconnected from what is going on these dating streets. I really am. But at the same time, I find it super interesting because of kind of what I've dedicated my life to. And, being older, being inside, it's interesting to see what the young bucks are going through. Now, y'all know about this man, Austin Holloman. We have him here today. Gonna bring him up in a second. He has been killing the game, and he has so much experience with traveling, with connecting with different people, different women, and we are going to hear his take on dating in the U.S. versus foreign women, and just kind of the state of affairs with women in general, because the stats say that a lot of young men are going through it. I think the number of sexless men in the United States has tripled in like the last 10 years, something like that. And to get to long term relationships, which is where most men end up, you got to have some success at dating women in the beginning. And it seems like for men, it's just getting harder and harder. So we are going to talk about that. And it's an interesting perspective for me because, once you get my age, I kind of feel like you don't really have any problems dating. But, your situation is so different. You look at young Austin, I'll be honest with you. And this is another thing I don't want to say. It makes me feel bad. Like, I'm old enough to be this man's father. All right. Like, we are in two totally different generations. And what I have to offer now as a man is completely different than what I had at 23, 24 years old. And the women that I'm dating now are way different than the women that I would date when I was younger. If I go on a date now, man, this lady got, 401ks and mortgages and rental properties. It's a totally different game. But I'm kind of at the end of the road. And our young man, Austin, is at the beginning. So I think it's going to be super interesting to hear his take on it. So shout out to MTR. Without further ado, all right, let us bring up our man, Austin. Austin, how are you doing, young brother?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I am doing fantastic. You have been on YouTube really crushing it. Congratulations on 100,000 subscribers. That is amazing.
Thank you.
If you can just take a minute or so to kind of introduce yourself, shout your channel out to anybody who hasn't heard of you, and kind of what are you doing over there on your channel?
So I'm Austin Holloman. As you may already know, I'm a world traveler and I journal. I'm not a journalist, but I do journal my travel through books, travel guides, and of course here my YouTube channel. And my main focus, and it's not the only thing, but my main focus is what it's like dating abroad. It's a social experiment, a worldwide social experiment of how much easier it is to connect with people in 2024, let's just say in the modern day, versus in the United States. And I've found that I was proven right from the beginning that it is easier elsewhere in the world. Even in places people consider that are Americanized, you still have a better time.
Let's talk about that. Kind of you've traveled so much. What are some of the countries that you've been to, or how many countries have you been to?
So I've been to 21. I've been to Peru. I've been to Brazil, Colombia, uh, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Chile.
Wow.
I've been to 7 countries in Africa, 2 in Europe, which is Poland, Romania, Kenya,
Mhm.
Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, uh, Zambia, Ghana, Senegal, and 4 in Asia, which is the
Jeez.
Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand. And I'm heading to Turkey for the next one.
And how old are you?
24. I'll be 25 on the 16th.
Wow. So 24 in all those different countries. That's amazing. You have had so many experiences that, I mean, most people really won't have in a lifetime. What kind of inspired you to do all of this traveling?
Uh, I've always wanted to travel, but I was kind of sold to the whole American propaganda that everywhere else outside of the United States is unsafe and HIV and crime and all that kind of stuff going on. Pretty much what they, unless it's in Western Europe or
Hmm.
Australia, that's how they sell it, and or China or Japan. But I started. I was in a relationship. I ended that, and I got out and I was dating. It was good at first, and then it got really, really hard. It doesn't mean I was sexless. It doesn't mean I was an incel or dry or anything. It just means that I wasn't getting what I knew I deserved or what I
I'm
had put into myself. And I was making good money at 20. I was completely independent with my own apartment, my own car. I dressed very well. Of course, I was a barber, so I kept my grooming. I got a haircut twice a week. I cut my own hair.
hmm
I was having to settle for the scraps, people that, you know, the phone call before the lotion, like Kevin Samuels would say,
hmm
or somebody you don't really want to be seen in public. And I was like, man, I know this can't be right. I know that something has to be different. So I was like, instead of me going to a different city, which I did, I went to Austin, Texas. I started in Dallas. I went to Austin and I dated a chick from Philadelphia as well. But I was like, I'm gonna switch everything. I'm gonna switch the continent, the country, the language, the culture, the history, everything. So I was started in Brazil and I haven't been the same since.
Wow. And how long have you been traveling, do you think?
I left the United States 19 months ago this month, but I traveled the first time February 2022, so a little over 2 years.
About 2 years. Fantastic. And is it fair to say that you kind of live outside of the United States now? That United States really isn't your residence where you reside?
Yeah, at all. Like I just got back this morning, actually, like at
Mhm.
4 o'clock this morning. And I was there for 3 weeks, but that was my first time being there since 18 months. So I wasn't there at all in 2023.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
And you were in Dallas, is that right? When you came
Yes.
back?
Yes.
What are some of the differences that you noticed when you came back? Now, coming back is always it's always interesting when you've been outside the states for a while. I lived in Mexico, on and off for 5, 6 years, and they have this thing, called culture shock when you leave and you go to another culture, and they do things differently. But then they have this term called reverse culture shock when you come back. And you're like, wait a minute now, is this really how things go where I'm from? What are some of the experiences that you've had or some of the things that you noticed when you came back that kind of struck you?
Well, without it even being about women, it was just the people in general. People
Mhm,
like to blame social media for why our culture is the way how it is. I think it's a matter of just American culture and the history we have in America combined with social media. Social media was just the worst icing on the cake they could have put for the United States, because they
mhm,
have social media in Brazil, and Brazil changed my life. Kenya changed my life. I have a few countries that changed my life, and Kenyans use social media a lot. Like that's a
mhm,
good place to blow up your social media if you wanted to. I would say start in Kenya. But I'm in Paraguay right now, which is in South America.
mhm.
It's one of the lesser known countries in the world. But if I go outside, even before I make it outside, the doorman speaks every time. Even though I see him several times a day, he speaks. The people in the elevator speak. Everybody's smiling, everybody's happy. Versus when I came back to the States, it's an isolated culture. People are way more cold. I thought people in Eastern Europe could be cold at times, but I've been reminded that there's even more cold than that.
Mm.
People are just generally more happy and more friendly.
Yeah, the United States, I mean, it could be serious. And I get that sometimes being born and raised in the South, in Atlanta, Georgia. And then I'll go up to maybe somewhere like New York. And I'll feel the same way. I'm like, man, nobody's smiling at each other. The black folks ain't nodding at each other. Like it's kind of cold, right? You kind of come back down south to get that southern hospitality. And I know that like being more specific with it, a lot of your content deals with the relationships between men and women and kind of your experiences. And I started watching some of your streams when you were down here in Dallas, and I was fascinated. Because again, you young and you outside and you really talking to these women, and I'm an old man. I'm in the house, and so I have in my mind how the dating culture is. But if I'm going to be fair, it's really kind of how it used to be, not really how it is now. How would you describe the dating scene here in the US, currently, let's say in 2024?
It seems like the majority, if not almost 100%, let's say 98% of the women of all races, it's not just black, people
Mhm.
like just black women, all races have become attention whores.
Mm,
It's pretty much I put in as much effort as I can, and sex, you can forget about that. That's going to be a whole nother algebra test you got to solve. But just getting basic respect, getting basic respect. You may have seen there was a video where I asked a chick what her name was, and
mhm,
she's like, "Why do you want to know?" And I was like, just making new friends. I don't need any new friends. I have never heard that in any other country in the world. Even in Eastern Europe, where I was the only black guy I would see for days, I
mm,
didn't hear it. And if you're black and everybody's white, the women might be a little, anxious about walking around in public with you, but they didn't even do that. And I come here to Paraguay the first day, even actually when I was in Bogota at the airport, I
mhm,
asked what their name is. They asked me what my name is back. Where are you from? It's a conversation starter. They're not as cold. So you pretty much have to do all you can, and you have to learn how. It's a game from what I'm seeing. It's a
mm.
game just to converse with somebody. Like I did a FaceTime. They told me don't make the FaceTime longer than 10 or 15 minutes. Otherwise, which was true. Which was true, they'll flake.
Mhm,
Versus in other countries, I meet them in person. There's no need for me to do an extra step of verification after you met me in person. I
mhm.
can meet them in person, text them. Usually I can go on a date with them the same day.
Wow, in other countries, but in the United States, it's not that way.
No, no, there's a whole there's an extreme FBI like vetting process you got to go.
It's an FBI, all right? They want to know. That's that's super interesting. Let me ask you, do you think it's and I know you're relatively young, so it's not like you've got 15 years, let's say, of dating experience, but do you think it's always been this way, or do you think things are changing?
From what I've seen growing up with my uncles and other people I knew that were older than me, it
Mhm.
seems like what I'm experiencing now is what it was like in 1995. I wasn't alive then, but even from then to 2005, I would say.
Mm.
Mhm.
That is becoming more and more difficult.
Yes, way more difficult.
Why do you think that is? What do you think is the impetus for these changes? Why it's more, let's say, difficult for men? Because I guess what we're talking about is from the man's perspective, right? And I don't know if any if any women want to chime in and say why maybe it could be more difficult for women as well, but it's just easier for us men to kind of look at it, stand in our own shoes. But why do you think it is that it's getting harder and harder, let's say, as the years go on for men?
That's a good question. And I will say this too, it's always been easy for women. A woman will always have more options than a man. But it seems like that fact of them having more options is now being abused.
Hmm.
To the fact that you said that sexless men have now tripled, that's not really an issue here in Paraguay. Like I've never noticed thirsty South American dudes that cock block too much.
Hmm.
But it's so dry in the States. We all know fighting behind a chick that you just met is a thing. Cock blocking is a thing. That's a huge deal. I don't know why it's like that. I mean, some people say after the pandemic that they just adapted to that social distancing. That's what it is. Social distancing now. You don't get too close to anybody, is what it feels like. Not physically, but just, as the whole situation.
Hmm. It seems to me that, well, let's take a look at it from the woman's side, I suppose, a little bit. If women are making it more difficult to get in relationships with them, presumably they're doing that for a reason, right? It's either subconsciously or consciously. What do you think that they are getting, or why are they doing this? What are they benefiting from by making it more difficult for men?
I don't know. That's something I'll probably have to answer at the end of the social experiment, which will be years from now. But I can only assume it's validation. What do you benefit by playing the game that they play? We
Hmm.
can't say, oh, like they like to say, oh, like it's dangerous. Women are coming up missing. Women come up missing in these other countries, probably more than the United States.
Mm.
In Cambodia, that's a big thing. People coming up missing. I had no issue conversing with Cambodians. I have no issue conversing with Kenyans or in Tanzania, people come up missing from the government. So what are we talking about? And those men are a lot harder on women in those other countries, but American men are not hard on women. By law, you can't be hard on women. You can not touch a woman and go to jail for it.
Facts. That is true. That is
So we're
true.
not hard.
Yeah. You mentioned maybe women are getting some type of validation or extra validation from making it more difficult for men. But I guess if we're honest, like women all around the world probably like attention and validation. Why do you think or what factors are in play in the United States that are not necessarily in Kenya or Brazil or Colombia? What would you chalk up the differences to? Like, why is the United States so different?
I don't have the exact answer on that, but I will say this, that laws make culture, right?
Mhm.
In Saudi Arabia, I think in 2015, women just got their right to drive cars. In
Mm.
Kuwait, women sit in the back seat of the car. When you have laws because those are laws in those places, women can, the laws are making the culture where you can't disrespect a man. You can't even drive a car. You can't even sit in the front seat. How are you going to be disrespectful? Versus we know in the United States, the land of the free, they can pretty much do whatever they
Yeah, which presumably, I mean, you would want, right? You would want a place where there is like equality, because we were born men, but just as easily we could have been born women. So it's not like we want to be subjugated if we're born women, right? Just a flip of the coin. But it does seem like men are wanting fair play, and it just seems harder now for men. Are there any countries or parts of countries that are kind of mirroring the changes that are occurring in the United States that you've seen?
So whenever I was in Accra, Ghana, and Medellin, Colombia, you
Mhm.
can see some similarities in those areas. Those are also areas that are heavily populated with Americans. It seems like 50% of those populations are American, especially.
Mm.
It gets to a point now where when you speak to a woman at times in Medellin, very often you will get ignored the same way you would in the States. Or you might get a nasty response. Not all the time. I wouldn't say the place is completely dead to meet Colombian women in Medellin,
Mhm.
but it's not that far off.
Oh, and it's interesting that you kind of connected it to Americans. Do you think Americans will go to a place and then kind of change the culture where it becomes colder? I think I've heard a lot of that in I've never been to the Dominican Republic, but I haven't heard a lot of great things about Sosua.
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of that is because Americans are down there and they've kind of changed the landscape. Have you ever been to Sosua or Dominican Republic or anything like that? Have you
No,
seen
but
it? Mhm.
no, but I will say this too. As American men, we usually, and this is why channels like mine are important, because I tell dudes about how to not behave abroad. Like, do not go down there and pedestalize a woman in Sasua because you're a virgin, and you don't know how to deal with women, but they do it anyway. And
Mhm.
those women get used to, when I see an American, he's gonna pay me just because I'm beautiful. That's what dudes do. I dated a chick, she had a dude send her $75 just because she was beautiful. That's very common for us to do that. And we don't heal our minds, which you really can't, but we don't heal our minds before we go there. And we do
Mhm.
the same thing. And after so many of us go there, we're dealing with the same thing in that area.
Mm. Yeah, it seems pretty difficult. What are some of the experiences that you had here in Dallas that kind of reminded you that you didn't really like the dating scene in the United States? Let me ask you first of all, kind of what's your take on dating apps? And not necessarily Tinder, because I guess it has a bad rap, but like if you've tried anything like Bumble or Hinge or anything like that.
So I've tried Bumble, Hinge, and Tinder.
Mhm.
Completely useless in the United States.
Really?
Even if I stayed it for a different city like New York, completely useless for me, and
Mhm.
apparently for other people because they're going through lawsuits. I would set a boost on Bumble in Dallas, and I would get 2 likes in 1 hour. I set a boost anywhere else in the world, and I would get what I would expect 30, 40 likes,
Hmm.
in 1 hour, maybe more. But I just find it odd that Bumble and Tinder, I was in the United States for 3 weeks, and I think I may have gotten like 7 matches between both apps in 3 weeks. Now, Hinge worked a little better for Dallas. I got 180 matches. I got 2 or 3 phone numbers, no dates, 2 FaceTime calls. One of them, we weren't going to be compatible anyway.
Hmm.
But you're better off in the States. You're better off taking your shot, just cold approaching on the street and just putting yourself out there, which I prefer to do anyway, because I like for people to get my real vibe versus what they assume online. But yeah, it's better overseas with dating apps. No problems, no complaints overseas with dating apps.
That is very interesting. And I got to be honest, I'm a little bit spoiled here in Atlanta because Atlanta, we just have so many black women that it seems like if I get on a dating app, it's just tons and tons of interest. Whereas if I got on a dating app in LA or something, my shit might be dry as hell. So, my view on dating apps, I guess, is skewed. But I wonder, what kind of changes can be done? Do you think that the only solution or the best solution is for men to travel? Or is there something that they can do to try to, I guess, increase the odds or to kind of change their situation?
Your best bet is to travel. I don't
Mm.
see any solutions for what we got going in the States. I think we need to just continue to let it go where it's gonna go because we have, as men, we have no say so. We have no control. Some dudes say, well, what about the guys that can't travel and they got it? What if they could just travel to a different state? Listen, a round trip ticket, let's say from California to Miami, is gonna almost cost you the same as it would to go to Brazil.
Mhm.
What you would spend on your Airbnb 1 week in Miami would pay for your Airbnb for 2 weeks in Brazil. And you would still have money left over to buy food and go on dates. So which one makes more sense?
Mm. Yeah. I mean, if you look at it like that, it certainly makes sense to travel. But if we're honest, most I don't think 95, 98% of men in this country can really live the lifestyle that you're living. 24 years old, 22 different countries. That can't really be the solution for the majority of men, right? Because I mean, the United States would just be empty. All the men would be in different countries. Um, is there any other solution besides besides traveling? I mean, there has to be something, right? Or no?
You can travel and bring her back. There's a risk with that, but what else can you do? The dating apps don't work. You
Hmm.
even and we can't say like, oh, the photos aren't wrong because at one point my dating app photos were wrong, and it didn't matter what country I went to, I wasn't getting the results I wanted. I had a friend of mine show me the photos, his photos, and he had me mirror similar photos to his, just myself, and literally overnight, the next day I was on a date, just like
Mm.
that. But take those same photos, put them in Texas, no dates, 3 weeks.
Wow.
So what is it? You can't use the dating apps. You can't approach women on the street because a large number of them find it as catcalling. I
Mhm.
watched a video on my live a minute ago where there was a woman walking through New York City, and dudes are like, "Hey, good morning, beautiful. How are you?" And she called that harassment. It's harassment. Something you could ask a man could ask another man, "Hey, how are you doing? Good morning."
Mhm.
That's harassment.
Let me ask you, and let me try to push back a little bit because it's hard for me to believe that you could be in Dallas for 3 weeks and not get a date. And the reason that I think that's hard for me to believe is because I'm sure that there are men in Dallas who women would consider less, let's say, less valuable, who are in relationships, right? And so when you say that you're looking for dates, is it more of like a standard type of thing? It's like when you see a girl and she's a 9 and she's like, "Oh, I'm alone. I can't get anybody." And men are like, "You could get a lot of people." Maybe your standards are too high. For someone like you to not be able to get a date in 3 weeks when, I'm sure that there are men walking around Dallas who, don't have an arm and have a date. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Like,
Somebody smashing them. I would agree. The women
mhm,
are not virgins. Somebody is smashing them. I don't know who that is. I've met a few guys. Usually they're from out of town. They go to Dallas. They have a good time. But it's not that my standards were too high. I mean, if
mhm,
you were one of my regular viewers that watched the entire 12-hour live stream, I have some people that sit there the entire time. You would see I approached average women, below
mhm.
average women, above average women. I approach above average women. Two of them, they're hanging out together, friendly conversation. Just want to follow them on Instagram, but won't even give up the Instagram. Instagram is public.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me take another angle at this. And again, this is going to kind of, it might seem like pushback, but I'm really trying to get down to the the truth of it, the truth of the situation, because it just seems so odd to me. And you're in the game and I'm not, man. You're young and I'm not. I'm old. So you're in the trenches. I'm just trying to really understand it. If you look at it from a woman's point of view and you say, okay, well, most people, men and women, they do want relationships, right? You say, well, what do women really want? What do they really want? And I watched one of your lives recently, and you were saying how, you know, you wanted to have I think you said something like, when you get into a new place, you want to see where the women are, right? Or our black men are where the hoes at, right?
Yeah.
And you didn't say that, I said that, but that's kind of the general sentiment. And I think that's a common thought, but it's certainly like maybe a younger thought. Because when you're old like me, man, you don't necessarily, that's not the first thing that comes to your mind. But when you're a young buck, you try to get it in. I get it. But is that what women really want? Do women want a guy who is, let's just say, let's be honest, just sleeping around? I think you had said that you, and I don't want to misquote you, so you let me know if I'm off base here, but I think you were talking about how when you meet a woman, you have a sexual interest in at least some of these women, and someone was like, well, if you just hit it and quit it, and you were like, no, I don't want to hit it and quit it. I want to stay around, and I want to have a lot of relations with these women. Is it fair to say though that most women don't want a man like that? Like most women don't want a man who's smashing a lot of women at the same time?
Let me tell you two things.
Mhm.
So let's go off my Instagram, right? If somebody sees me in person, they're not going to know I sleep around with a lot of women. So we're going to base this off of an online portfolio.
Okay.
My portfolio before I started traveling was just Austin Holloman, maybe a picture I had with some family or some friends, just me. Then I had an old friend of mine. He told me you should show some social proof and put it on your Instagram. Show that other women have a good time being around you. So I start when I would go hang out with chicks. If I had a good time with her, let's take a picture together. It wouldn't be like we're hugged up, like we're in a relationship. Just I have a pretty friend and we're hanging out. Sometimes I'll be in a club and it's three chicks. Doesn't look like I'm smashing any of them. Just looks like I'm women like being around me.
Mhm.
In some countries, because of that, when I started doing that, I didn't have to advertise myself. Women started messaging me. Women would, when I would be on the phone with them, they even say, all these women look happy with you, and they wouldn't go anywhere after that. Even American women that I couldn't get before would now get on the phone.
Mhm.
Now it's just like walking in a room with a beautiful woman on your arm. I mean, women want the guy that everybody else wants. They don't want the guy that's saying, "Oh, nobody wants me." I think we can agree on that.
True. True. Nobody really wants to be with a
So
reject.
somebody told me like, hey, you should, because at first I thought the game was, make it seem like she's the only one. That didn't work. Worldwide, that does not work. Telling a woman like, oh, you're the only one. Oh, when I was a barber, I'd be like, oh yeah, no, I haven't really gone on any dates like that. I just work. I would never
Mhm.
hear back from those women.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to ask is I give human beings a lot of credit for being able to read other human beings on a biological level when it's really important. Because that's how the species got to 2024. We didn't get to here from where we started in caves, 50 and 100,000 years ago by not being able to really look at somebody and figure out what's going on because of evolution, right? Those people who couldn't figure it out, they didn't make it. And so what I'm wondering is if a woman looks at you and you're young, you're covered in tats, and is she reading a certain energy about you that might be like, this guy is not necessarily, maybe this guy is like a bad boy type of guy, but he's not necessarily a relationship type of guy. Do you think that's fair or that's not a really a fair assessment?
Well, here's how it went for me. Whenever I was a barber with no tattoos,
Hmm.
I wore suits, dress shirts, tucked in. I tucked in my shirt pretty much every day. If we're talking 2020, 2019, you can look at my profile and scroll to the bottom and see that. Yeah, they took me as I often heard women say, like, you don't have enough edge or you seem kind of soft. So the tattoos, I don't really think make a difference because the women will be getting beaten up by a guy with tattoos and she can't leave him. So
But those are
what
broken women,
is it?
let's be honest.
But what is it? Which one is it? Because it seems like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So do what you want.
Hmm. I mean, I think that's fair. Is it another? If we look at it from another angle. I mean, you're young. You're 24. Man, when I was 24, I mean, you got me beat, boy. When I was 24, I didn't have nothing. I wasn't traveling. I wasn't doing this. I guess I was trying to be in law school somewhere. But what I have to offer now at 47 is different than what I had to offer a woman at 24. And could it be that the women are just thinking, man, at 22, 23, 24, what do you really have to offer in terms of a long-term relationship? Or you don't think it's that either? Because I mean, and to be fair to you, it's not a fair answer. Okay, well, wait till you're 47, right? I mean, that's not a fair thing. I guess I'm just trying to figure out what the real deal is. Um, do you think it would be easier if you were a little bit older?
I recently put up a tweet and I said, being young is actually the worst thing for a young man.
Mm,
I cannot tell you how many women have looked past because as a young man, what do we think about? Okay, he's in school, he doesn't have much money, he's immature, he doesn't have his own place, his own car, he doesn't know anything.
mhm,
And for me, when I was 20, yes, I may have not been as mature as at 24, 25. But the thing is, I had actually a damn good financial life. I was doing very well for a 20-year
yeah.
old. And but women will automatically disqualify you. Now with cougars, I had no problem with that. But I mean, again, they're 40 years old, 35 years old, talking to a 21 year old. That's just fun. So I can't. The thing is, when I was in the States, when I was 22, I couldn't date other 22-year-olds. Number one, they weren't that smart. But
Mhm,
number two, they would automatically put those stigmas on me that he's lesser than. He doesn't have maturity or money or experience. No, we could say experience. We
mhm.
could say I was mature enough to pay. I don't have a late car note. I don't even live in the States and I've been paying my car note. I'm mature enough to pay my bills on time.
Right.
I'm mature enough to do adult duties. Nothing was out of tech when it came to that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But when I go to why is it that when I go to Brazil, I can date a 22-year-old now at 22?
Yeah. Do you think it has something to do with the the economics of these countries. I was talking to somebody last year, and they were on YouTube or whatever, and they were saying like to go on a date in LA, I mean, it could easily cost $200. And there's no way as as a 24, 26 year old I could pay $200 per date. Do you think that in other countries it might be easier to relate to women because maybe you can go out more, and women here probably know that, a lot of men are not going to want to take me out if it's $200. They're just going to want to smash or invite me over, and maybe that kind of leads to some bitterness or some obstacles to see if the women to see for women to see if you're really interested or not.
Well, I'll tell you this. For me, it wasn't. Well, we want to talk about economics in the United States. Every Friday I would make $1,500.
Mm,
So it wasn't economic. That's why I could never understand this. It was never economics for me. I also say this: women compete with however many rich men are in their society. In Brazil, they don't have nowhere near as many millionaires and billionaires or successful men, I should say, as we do in the United States, as everybody knows. Same thing with pretty much anywhere else in the world, maybe outside of Western Europe.
mhm.
So when you see like Latinas in Paraguay, Uruguay, well, I'm not gonna say Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, Bolivia, they're super feminine and they're super catering to men because they have to compete because all women have for since the beginning of currency have always wanted rich men.
Mhm.
They've always been highly desired. So in these other countries, the men are in shorter supply. So the women have to act right if they want that man. Versus in the States, no need to text you back. No need to, I can flake on you, no problem, because there'll be another guy that makes $300,000 a year. Because there are plenty of guys making that in the States. You got
Yeah.
paying OnlyFans models $60,000. You never heard of them. They're not celebrities, but they got the money. So they don't
Yeah,
have
that's
to act right.
crazy.
What do they need to act right for? I don't need to act right to find an apartment here in Paraguay because they're building new ones every day. I don't have to pay your price. I can go somewhere else. That's how women look at men in the States. So that's why they don't compete.
Mm,
Disposable.
disposable. Do you have friends around your age that are kind of running up against the same obstacles of just it's just so hard to date as a young guy currently?
Yes, dudes that made less money than me, and that's why it was ironic. Dudes that made less money than me were having the same issues as me. So it's really not my problem. I don't live there.
Hmm.
I'm studying it at this point, but I don't know what's the solution. The only solution is to do what I'm doing. If you ask me,
If you can, is it fair to say that you're really not looking for a long term monogamous relationship right now at your age?
do you think most 24-year-olds are?
Some are. I mean, if you go to like Oklahoma, Alabama, some of these traditional places, like they're young people, especially if you talk about religious people, conservative people. The United States is a big place. So, maybe in Dallas, I don't know how it is in Dallas. I've never been, but there are a lot of young conservative people that are really looking like, hey man, let's not necessarily marriage so much, but let's just get in a long-term relationship, you and me, and let's figure this thing out. Right. If you say that's not for you, that's fine.
No,
But
it is. I want kids and everything. That is for me one day, but I'm not fit for that right now because I'm in my social experiment, which requires me to jump to about 100 countries. So I can't. I wouldn't even be right to ask somebody to be in a relationship with me. We can
mhm,
stick around, and if she does, of course. If she doesn't, I don't care. I know what I'm doing. I know what comes with this.
right. And so that's why I was wondering if you think that sometimes women can pick up on that. Women can pick up. Mhm.
No, because before I started traveling and I was a barber, I did stuff that would give off, I'm interested. I want to learn more about you. That doesn't work either.
It doesn't work to let a woman know that you're interested and you want to know more about her.
It didn't. Not in 2020. Not in 2021. It didn't. No.
But I mean, okay, that's fair. But you were 20, also. You know what I'm saying? It's like you were so You weren't even 21, right? You were so young. And if it
So
didn't work out with you, wait, let's talk about that. You said you were in a long-term relationship or let's say a monogamous relationship that didn't work out?
yeah, well, we could call it long term. I mean, if you year and a half, if you consider that long term, I guess it's longer than what I've been dealing with now. Yeah.
Yeah. If let's say that didn't work out, that long-term relationship didn't work out. But that's just one relationship though, right? That's just with one
Yeah.
woman. And we've all and listen, when you get my age 47, man, been with so many women where it's like, oh my God, these people are crazy. Like some stuff is just not gonna work out. And I totally feel you when you say that, listen, man, I'm 24, 25 right now. I'm not trying to settle down. And I think that's awesome that you know that about yourself. A lot of men, they think they want to settle down. They get a girlfriend and 3 months later they're cheating all over town. Right. And you're just like, man, that's not where I'm coming from. So, that type of introspection, I think is really good and really mature. But it just seems like it's hard. It would seem to me it would be a hard sell to get a woman to stick around if she could sense that, I'm gonna have sex with her and then I'm gonna have sex with a lot of other women to the extent that I have possible.
Women are horrible character, judgment of character. I do know that.
You think women are horrible judges of character?
They're a horrible judge of character. That's why they pick the men that they do.
Um, I guess you're talking about younger women who
Yeah.
pick like the thugs or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't even have to be a thug, but they just go after the guy. I mean, I've women that I've dated over the years, I've just listened to the stories of the dudes that they dated before me.
Mhm.
And there's a reason why you had to meet the parents first. There's a reason why all this traditional stuff used to be a thing. There's a reason why you
Mhm.
had to meet the dad and the uncles and the brothers. There's a reason why that was the thing. Because women are a horrible judge of character. They can't do it by themselves. Women are supposed to be led by men.
Mhm.
That's why the father helps vet. So maybe that is another issue that we're getting into is that a lot of these women don't have fathers. And I'll tell you here in Paraguay, in Uruguay, in Argentina, a lot of them do have fathers. It's not like the United States. So maybe that's another issue. I mean, it's not my problem, but maybe that's another reason why.
Yeah, it definitely could be. Yeah, it seems like such a complex issue. And when I was your age, I mean, I'll be honest, when I was your age, it was just hard for us to, we could get one good girl, man. We'd be like, man, that's that's what's up. That's what's up. And I remember in my 20s, it was one thing to get a woman, and then my 30s, it was another thing to get a woman. In my 40s, it's just it gets easier as it goes along. And that's why I appreciate you talking to me, because it's kind of informing me. In my head, I'm just thinking like it is now the way it was back then, but it just seems like that's just not the case. Can you talk a little bit? You mentioned the experience you had when you were trying to talk to a girl and she rejected you rudely. Can you tell us like the details of some of these experiences that you had when you were in Dallas?
For example, I came back to the United States to get my birth certificate and do my FBI fingerprint so I can get a residency here in Paraguay.
Hmm.
And I was outside of the state secretary building, I believe it was. And I just asked the chick that was walking out, is this that building? And she mugged me, and it was on live, so people saw this. She mugged me and pretty much just blew me off. I don't know what she thought I asked her. I don't know if she thought that was my opening line, to flirt with her. I wasn't interested. I really want to know if that was the building.
Hmm.
You have that type of code because that's a very common response to, hey, where's the nearest subway at? You damn
Yeah.
near get cussed out for asking that. You know, it's there's no basic respect. The United States operates off of no morals. The culture operates off of no morals.
Yeah, some of the comments, the responses that you got from women, is highly disrespectful, and it almost seems like people can be disrespectful and there's no consequence, right? Because it's not like you're gonna go up and push them or something like that. It's just, they just take a free shot. And it kind of reminds me of social media in the sense that if you're an influencer, even if you're a TikToker with, 500 followers, if you watch a woman going live on TikTok, a woman can be super disrespectful to her people in the chat. Like, it doesn't really matter. And now it just seems like that's kind of reflected onto real life. Do you think that's kind of a fair assessment?
Maybe so. I tell you what, Muslims, their women don't talk to them like that.
Yeah, well, I really don't know too much about Muslims, to be honest. I would not want to live like in, Saudi Arabia or something necessarily. I wouldn't want those typical laws. Do you think it's possible to have laws that are more or less, I don't want to say the laws are equal because I've been doing law a long time, and uh, let's say the laws are equal, but certainly not the administration of the laws. But if you say, okay, men and women can do this, men and women can do that, as opposed to, women can't drive and women can't do this and women can't do that. If you have a society that's more open and at least on paper more even-handed, do you think that this is kind of where it's just going to lead, where women they just start putting up more and more obstacles, and it
Yes,
just makes it harder for men?
the women behave in a way that the men in their society have allowed them to. Men have always been in charge. So any freedoms that women have now are granted by men. We know in the United States, I don't see what else they can grant women. They've granted them everything.
Mhm.
Versus somewhere like Sudan or somewhere like Kuwait or Yemen, they don't have those same freedoms. So it's really the men's fault for granting them as much as they had. There's no real regulation.
Yeah, and I think you were saying that it's not even, just to kind of be clear, it's not like a black woman thing, right? You see this. Do you date other races of women in the United States, like white women,
I've
Hispanic, or
dated
something like that?
all of them. I've dated all of them except for Indians.
So do you think it's more of a cultural thing as opposed to a race thing?
It's an American culture thing. When we go to other countries, especially in Africa, South America, pretty much everywhere. They
Hmm.
think Americans are stupid. They don't single out Black Americans. They think Americans are stupid. We have the same education system, the same laws, the same federal laws that allow us to be as stupid as we are, that allow us to behave as entitled as we are.
Mm.
It's an American culture. I would love for somebody to find a video of me targeting Black women. In
Hmm.
specific, I target American women as a whole because they are the byproduct of American culture.
Interesting. Guys, I'm sure y'all have some comments, maybe y'all have some questions for our young brother. I keep calling you young. I'm sorry. I'm just old, man. And I'm feeling my age these days. But for our brother Austin, I'm gonna drop the link if anybody wants to come up and talk to Austin, congratulate him on his 100,000 subscribers, which is amazing. I can tell you as a YouTuber myself, man, to get that 100,000, it's so hard. You got to put up with so much BS, stuff that you guys see, stuff that you guys don't see. It's a bunch of BS. So shout out to our brother Austin for making it. While I